Welcome to the Leo Training Podcast with Joe DeLeo. You'll hear in-depth interviews and tips from world-class athletes, coaches, and industry-leading experts to help you train smarter and improve at what you love to do. Train smarter, get stronger, move better, race faster. Here's your host, Joe DeLeo.
Hey everyone, thank you for tuning in for the first episode of the Leo Training Podcast. Today we have a great guest for you, Erin Cafaro Mackenzie. Erin was a mainstay on the United States women's national rowing team. She's a 7-time national team member and a 2-time Olympic Gold Medalist. Erin is currently the COO of Unscared, Inc. And in this episode, you're going to hear her journey through rowing, as well as what she's currently up to in movement, endurance, and strength and conditioning. Sit back and enjoy the episode. Erin, thank you for joining us today.
Thanks, Joe.
Cool.
I'm honored to be the first podcast guest.
Yes, Erin is
This is going to go down in history.
That's right. Erin is the inaugural guest for the Leo Training Podcast. So, Erin, if you could just kick things off, you're probably well known in the rowing community. But I'd really like you to take the opportunity over the next couple of minutes and share your story, your journey from, being a rower at Cal to the Olympic stage, and then what you've been up to the last couple of years, and how you've transitioned from that Olympic caliber athlete to being a strength and conditioning and endurance coach currently.
All right, I'll try to summarize this as best as possible, but so I started rowing. I actually got in the boat when I was still in high school. I was a basketball player, and I knew I wanted to play a sport in college. I just always had this extra energy, and knew I felt better when I, was playing a competitive sport or a team sport. And so my basketball season didn't go so well my junior year, and my dad left a newspaper article on the kitchen counter. I think it was my senior year, about a girl from Turlock who played basketball and softball and whatnot, but now she had a full ride scholarship to University of San Diego and was trying out for the U.S. National rowing team. And I grew up in Modesto, California, and so there's really no water around there, nor is there much water in Turlock besides canals to water, all the farmland around us. Mm-hmm. So my first instinct was, Turlock was one of our rival high schools, and so I was like, well, if this girl from Turlock can do it, I can do it. So I went out and tried to find a place to row in the Central Valley of California, and the closest place was about 45 minutes away. And it was a new boat club. They'd taken all of University Pacific's old rowing things. Like we were probably the only crew that still had tulip blades and big old, like heavy, like wooden, I don't even know, maybe they were old Vespoli's now that I think about it, but they were, the parents had to help us take the boat down, and it was pretty funny. So that was, I just wanted to check out the sport before I started applying to, knew what I was even going to get into. And so then after, I did it a couple times, and I was like, okay, I'm okay at it. I was beating some of the boys too, and I was like, all right, I can do this. If I'm beating the boys, we're on to something. So I, just started calling around to different schools, and it was mostly just all West Coast schools. And of course, I, was applying to all the best rowing schools because I didn't know any different. And, so called up Stanford and UW and, Cal, and pretty much they asked me, do you have rowing experience? And at the time I was too embarrassed I was like, oh yeah. I've gone out in a couple boats and done a couple races, and they're like, all right, so what's your 2K time? And I was like, oh yeah, we just did one of those. And literally it was, one of the old school, like, I think it was like Model A or B. It was still the bicycle wheel that was, visible in the concept too. And so I think I even remember like talking during it, and, like all the guys were there, and so I told him, long story short, I was like, oh yeah, I think it was like a 9 something. And after that, I didn't really hear back from them. So the only one that continued, I continued to pepper the freshman coach at the time, who was at Cal. Her name was Sarah Nevin. And she was gracious enough to let me come to campus and do a tour. It wasn't an official tour because she was just like, I don't want to waste my money on this 9:30, recruit. And so I went to campus and told her, and she saw me, and she was like, you look a little bit more athletic than I thought. Let me just give you a tip. Never say never say you've done a 2K. Just next time someone asks, just say you haven't done one. And I was like, oh, okay. But needless to say, she and Dave O'Neill took a chance on me, really. And I think, I don't know if it was, our conversation during that recruiting trip or whatnot, but they, I once I got into Cal, they let me walk on the team, and I guess you could say, well, the rest is history. But we can go more into depth on that one too.
Sure. That's awesome. So obviously 4 years at Cal, and then you started to kind of get into the mix a little bit. I'm guessing you went to some selection camps, U23s obviously, and then that segued into the senior team, correct?
Yeah. It wasn't quite the Cinderella story that everybody assumes. There was actually 2 years that I took off of rowing at Cal.
Okay.
I rowed my freshman year, and then sophomore year, I came down with the typical college mono and got injured on the comeback, and then finally, our team doctor, who I still talk to, actually, great lady, Cindy Chang, and she was like, how about you just take some time off and like figure out, if you really want to be rowing. So I went and did a semester abroad. I went and just was a typical college student. And just kind of got it all out of my system. And then DeLeo called me back. It was the summer after my junior year, and said, I think we have a really good team. And I see you contributing to it. And so I was like, you know what, why not? I'll try it again. If I don't like it, I can always stop. And so it was my senior, I really only rowed for 2.5 years in college, which is kind of funny. So everybody's like, oh yeah, you just, walked on, and then, rowed 4 years at college, and then just went to the national team. And I was like, kind of. It's easier just to say, yeah, sure. But I like to kind of share this story now, because everybody thinks that, to make the national team, you need to start rowing in high school, or you need to row all 4 years in college. And, it's definitely gotten more competitive, but I think what's most important is that you really want to be there. And that there's no doubt that, you want to have this college experience, or you want to, concentrate more on academics, or all those things are totally legit. And, I think every college student should experience all of that.
Do you think the time that you took away
going abroad, that really allowed you to kind of step back and focus and realize that rowing was something you wanted to continue to pursue?
Yes and no. I think it actually helped me grow up more as a person. I don't think it was like, I wasn't thinking about rowing the whole time I was not rowing.
Mm-hmm.
That wasn't it. I think I was just allowed to get, kind of like the jitters out of my system, or all these, things that that's, just the thought of regret of not taking, having the college experience, or, being able to go out and socialize and party. And I think a lot of coaches actually, that's what they're fighting against with all of their athletes. They're like, oh no, you can't, don't go party, don't go, you got to be organized. And I think college is actually a good time to kind of screw up. I hate to say it, but like you're home, you're on your own. And I'm one of those people that I have a hard time learning from other people's mistakes. I have to learn from my own mistakes. And so I really think that's what, that's kind of what happened, is like I was going down hard in the wrong direction, and you learn from it. And I finally, it was just I have to really give DeLeo credit to even coming back into my life and being like, this short girl can contribute to my team. I don't know what he saw in me, but he really was the one that brought me back into it. Cause I don't know. I was, training for marathons and doing, a little bit of everything, but, I think, just to allow athletes to screw up a little bit rather than preventing. It's almost like parenting, right? Like, are you going to like make sure that their hand never goes in the fire, or are you going to have them like burn their hand a little bit so they know that don't put your hand in the fire, Right. So
yeah, sometimes experience is the best teacher. And, it's also a time of your life where you're, like you just mentioned, you're figuring out who you are as a person and what you want to do and what interests you and what you're passionate about.
For sure. Yeah, and I just see so many people getting so serious about sport very early in their life. And it's just, and I was there too. Like I went down this path hard, and I was like, I was so obsessed with winning, just for the sake of winning. And it didn't matter what it was. And I think that's, I do think that's a reason I was successful. But then on the back end of it, now I'm like, why was I even wanting to win? Like, what does it mean to be the best at something? Like, and it's not just about winning. Like, what are you going to do with that? So that's kind of where, I guess, to, shoot quickly down the slide to where I am now. I think that's where I am. It's like, once I came back into rowing, I just had this obsession with being the best and just winning all the time. And then now here I am like, what does that even mean? Like, what did I make of that? And what can I still make of that? Is it too late to make anything of this career? And so I really think that's why it's good to have some, screw up time, but also really reflect on why you are doing the sport you're doing.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. It's so critical to know that. And one of the things you just touched on too is the idea of getting into sport early as a youth, and that almost that environment, that pressure to win and produce and be a great athlete. And it's it's all over media and marketing, and it's romanticized, and they're looking for the next LeBron James or Tiger Woods, and you still need to be a kid. You still need to grow up and have fun and just enjoy being with your friends.
Yeah.
And I think that's some of the things that you're talking about right now too.
Sure. Yeah. And then one thing that I would not, reverse the clock and do anything over again. But one thing I actually realized that I forgot how to do was play. When I was so obsessed with winning, is that and I'm trying to figure it out again, like hanging around little kids and, trying to be on par with them. But I suck at playing. Like, I really do. I only am good at winning. And then nobody really wants you around because you're just super competitive and, get pissed when you lose. And so it's kind of funny that, someone who was a professional at playing a sport forgot how to play,
Yeah, it's how do you turn that switch off, right? Because you've been so competitive at such a high level for such a long time.
And the reward system is like, oh, everybody's giving you like kudos and attention for winning. And it's like, why would I want to do anything different, Right. Yeah. So it's an interesting circle.
Yeah. So how has that changed now? So obviously, you competed in college, trained on the national team, was part of some unbelievable crews that had a very, very long streak in winning and becoming the gold standard in women's rowing. And now you've transitioned. You're at a different point in your life and in your career. And so, how do you play now? Is your focus more on doing, marathons or, I know your work with your husband, Brian, and CrossFit Endurance. So is it more play now, or is it more focused on the competitions or the fitness still?
Yeah, it's, right now my play is to almost reteach my body how to move again, correctly. And it's that actually sounds pretty boring versus, signing up for a Ironman or an ultra marathon, which I did do right after, I retired from rowing. And, it's much cleaner to think like, oh, I'm going to sign up for this race and then I'm going to go do it and I'm either going to do well or not. And then versus, being like, no, I want to get better at a handstand, or I want to, have better movement, function in my hips. Like, how do you measure that? Like, that doesn't sound very fun, but, I've gone through, I'm obsessed with, gymnastics and martial arts right now, just because it's like, it is just more of a feeling. And, I danced for 12 years growing up, and it was classical ballet. I know it's funny for a lot of people to picture me in that type of scenery, but anyhow, I was there, and it's bringing me back to movement and not just and rhythm versus just going hard to the line. Like, no, at any cost, I'm going to sign up for this race, and at any cost, I'm going to finish this race, no matter what it looks like, what it feels like. And, suffering is a skill. It is. And I got really, really good at suffering. And I think I attribute that, 100% to all of the teammates that I had around me. They taught me how to be a competitor, for sure. We taught each other how to be competitors. And that's how, the U.S. system, and even at Cal, that's how we got so good, is we, the coaches were there to kind of guide the culture, for sure. But I was just so fortunate to be around these human beings that were just wanting to be the best at everything. But it really didn't matter how we got there, if that makes any sense. No, it didn't matter that we had fun. It didn't matter that we that it was healthy. It was just like, how are you going to get this number? How are you going to, break 640? Doesn't matter. Just hammer. And then, so now I'm just kind of like, I know how to push, but how do you flow? like how can, and I think that I haven't figured it out yet, but I know that there's a way to use a little bit of both. Like the hustle and flow, the grace and the grit. Like we all got really good at that, like gritty, like hustle.
Yeah.
But now it's like, how can you take the path of least resistance?
Yeah. No, that's awesome. Everything you're talking about there, it's funny because I can draw some parallels in my own experience, and that's kind of what I care a lot more about nowadays is feeling good when I wake up and moving well. And as you get older, your perspective, it really shifts, and you're not as concerned with hitting the next PR. Or the next, whether that's on the erg or in a race or the amount of weight you lift for a specific lift. It's more about, quality of life and movement and health. And that's something that, I realized after rowing, like I had some serious imbalances. My body had taken what it had done on the erg and in the boat. And when I would walk around, I felt like I was kind of walking on like one leg. Like I was, my body had sort of taken the dominant side of, being a port rower and that translated to how I moved around. And I was like, this isn't good. This doesn't feel right.
I remember like walking around, with friends or whatever, or even just when we would go on runs, and you can tell what side somebody rode on just by their shoulder tilt. And I was like, oh, you're starboard. That's so funny. I can tell. Right. And now I'm like, that's bad. Like if you are doing something that like humans have been doing for, hundreds of thousands of years, that should be, just a very functional, one dynamic movement forward. Why are you leaning to one side? Right. Like that is an imbalance, And not only that, and something that I didn't really care about at the time, but like, what's the long-term effect of that? Like, how is that actually going to affect you in this sport that you care about? Not so much because when you're young, like, you feel like there's no clock. And I bet that's probably why we're like now, like, oh, like, let's focus on the quality. But when you're young, you're like, I don't feel anything. Like, yep. I'm going to live till 100. But
you're invincible.
What would have like kind of stopped me in my tracks when I was younger and rowing would be like, when you continue to have this movement pattern like this, what is that doing to your rowing? Like, and I even had a coach that was like, no, your body just has to adapt and like curve. And, it's going to go through some growing pains and some, broken ribs, and it'll just, and your spine will just adapt to rowing that side. And I was just like, oh, okay. So I'm just going to have a spine that's like curved over to the right, and my shoulder's just going to dip. Like that's good. So then I'll just be a really good rower. But what we found out is that, it's just like anything, like the hustle and the flow, the grace and the grit. If you have too much of one thing, something is being sacrificed, and it's not so much it is about being balanced, but if there is no balance, you aren't your strongest human.
Right. Absolutely. I mean, I'm so glad to hear you say that, because that's a lot of the things that I'm kind of trying to get out there to the rowing community, that there's so much more that we can improve performance on the erg or in the boat. And we don't necessarily have to spend 99% of our time in our sport. There's other activities that can contribute and enhance our performance, that complement, but also make us move better and feel better.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's awesome.
So let's chat a little bit about that. I mean, so what would you do now in terms of your knowledge base, right? What strength training would you implement to help balance your body if you were still competing at a high level? What do you think are good exercises rowers should be doing?
Well, I actually had a little moonlight tour last spring. Helped a teammate go back to the national selection regatta. So it was almost it was a good testing platform to be like, would any of this work, or would any of this be applicable if I cut the volume, in half and increase the intensity? And lo and behold, it's a further story to why I didn't continue, to go and row still. But long story short, like I saw the light and I was like, oh wow, this really could help a lot of people if they were just, took their long steady state rows into it's a skill row, versus like, oh, I just need to get 20K done. No, like let's get 10K or maybe even 12K of something that you're constantly thinking about your movement and your skill. And it's not a bunch of different things, but you're like, I'm thinking about, my pelvis, like where is my pelvis? Like, and just being aware of that, you really can't concentrate on that more than an hour would be huge to have. I mean, that would even be for someone with OCD like myself that could just hammer and hammer for a whole hour. But, I think a lot of coaches like to take their athletes to complete exhaustion so that they will become efficient. Which there sometimes is a truth to that. But if you're doing what I realized when I kind of came back to rowing, what was that, last spring around, March, was that you will just resort to a dysfunctional movement pattern just to survive, and that's what your body will call on when you're in a stress state. Now, when are you in a stress state? Well, in the middle of a 2K, right? So that is the movement pattern that your body's going to call on, versus just ingraining a good movement pattern over and over and over again. There's plenty of other sports that do it this way, and even neurological books that say you just focus on the skill and the correct movement pattern until you can't maintain it anymore. Then you take a break. You give your mind just kind of like a rest, and then you try to do it again. And if you can't do it again, you got to step away, because every repetition you do it incorrectly that's how you're going to actually call upon it when you're in a stress state. So I know I kind of did a roundabout on that one, but for what we did was basically, going into the gym or even, outside and moving like a human being, rather than just a rower. So I can't even put, together a handful of exercises, because we pretty much did everything. We wanted to make sure that our body could move in every single plane, because that's balance. Can you be overhead? Can you be, of course we can be here, day in, day out, but can you be in a open chain environment too? Because a lot of us, that's the difference between, sweeping and sculling. It's closed versus open. And, just the stability. I think that's the biggest thing that rowers can really work on. And that I did as well, was one-legged, one-arm stability. Anything from a one-legged squat to a one-legged step-up. Or one of the hardest things that we did was balance on one leg, like with your shoes off, or even on like an uneven surface. That was like squishy. Just the simplest things and that's usually what it is when something gets complicated, you're just trying to go around the issue. something's really simple, that's usually going to help you hone in on, what's really important. If it's too complicated, then you're just going to get exhausted from trying to do it, and just get fatigued. But yeah,
but simple does not necessarily mean it's easy.
No,
right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
No, that's great. I love that. I think that's a lot of what I've been reading and working with and my clients and athletes, and it's the skill practice, and you get the training is an effect. It's not the goal of the session. It just happens as a result, and you're really working on learning and training the central nervous system, and then all that the fitness happens over time as a result of all that. I think that's awesome. I think that's great.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
So let me let's take a look at some of the rapid fire questions we got here. How you doing on time?
Good.
Okay. Okay. So we talked a little about strength training. Okay. So what advice would you give yourself 10 years ago, knowing what you know now? If you could go back in time, what advice would you give yourself 10 years ago?
Ooh, okay. So that would mean I was 22, just getting out of Cal and probably just moving to Princeton, New Jersey, to be on, what was that? Yeah. So it would have been 2006 was my first, summer on the, U.S. team. And I guess I would say to my 22-year-old self, it's probably more in the theme of what I'm trying to do right now, is just learn how to flow more and not, I finally came to, probably came to this conclusion later in my career, but I couldn't outmuscle, or I couldn't outdo anybody on my team, because they were, physiological freaks. Like they're, 6'4", 180, just powerhouses. And so I would say, don't try to outmuscle them, just try to outsmart them. And I, finally learned that in my last year, in 2011 to 12. And so it wasn't so much about being the strongest. It was more about how can I get the best out of the people I'm rowing with. But yeah, that was kind of the really big pivot in my career, was not trying to be the MVP anymore. It was trying to make the MVP better, or the last person on the team better. That's really how I got, even looked at all. Because I was on the bottom of the ranks, for the first few years on the team, and it was just everybody just expects you to come in last. But if you come in like second or third to last, then they're like, whoa, like, what are you doing? And then, so you get a chance to go with someone a little bit better, and you make them, go into the top group. It's not necessarily about winning yourself. It's really about making the next person better. So it's, so I guess, yes, it's flow, but also just concentrate on making other people better as well.
Awesome. I love it.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's talk a little bit more about what you're doing right now with your career. So you're no longer competing at the Olympic level. It seems like you have sort of multiple businesses going on. Is that right? From what I've gathered, I saw, like, you sent me the link to your website. There was 5 different links to other websites there. So
yeah, that is a work in progress, I guess you can say. So my husband, he's also a trainer and just he's a movement specialist, I guess is the best way to talk about it. He just has this eye that, you can watch someone, how they sit or walk, or, just how they are, and can tell them, where you can optimize their performance better, whether it's just, even if not even an athlete, if it's just someone who's like, oh, I'm in pain, my parents, it's like, I'm my knee's in pain. And he's like, well, yeah, it's because you're standing with your, standing on one side on that knee, and it's, valgus, and you have no arches, and it's just like it's kind of a fun and wonderful thing and horrible thing to be around all the time, because you constantly feel judged. But so to bring it back, those all of those companies are his way to kind of help people improve on their quality of life, or even, the goals that they are trying to achieve, to whether it be in sports or health and nutrition. And so he has this amazing ability to do a lot of different things at once. And I have this amazing ability to only do one thing really well at once. And so the site right now, called Unscared.com, is, it's just kind of the umbrella for a bunch of different brands that we're trying to bring together, more for my sanity than his. But it's just, a wellness and awareness type of training versus just follow the directions and, go from A to B. We want to, give people steps to get, and progressions to get to their goal, but, have them make their goal. And it's almost like choose your own journey. So that's pretty much what this, my husband has Unscared tattooed on his knuckles, and it's interesting. I always get intrigued to hear what people. It's such an intriguing word, and I am interested to hear what that word even means to people, because it means something, it just means awareness to us, and being aware of what you are afraid of, not necessarily not being scared. So I don't know, what does unscared mean to you? If somebody was like, be unscared.
Be unscared. It's continuing to do the things that I have to do day to day, so I can start taking steps to where I want to be. Meaning, continuing to grow this business and help the rowing community. Promoting better movement and health and wellness, and sort of starting to look at, instead of just that very narrow, tight lens just on the sport of rowing, let's kind of open it up and see what we can do to bring in a lot of different modalities, whether that's strength training or looking at the work that physical therapists do, and the FMS community or the CrossFit community, or things that have been around for thousands of years, like the kettlebell or the Indian clubs, and these tools that have sort of been forgotten and are kind of making a comeback. So kind of, I guess, it's in some ways trying to embrace the past to propel us to the future.
Ooh, I like that.
Cool. So going along with that, you guys are also doing, I saw on Instagram, you got some awesome stuff happening right now. You've been doing some rowing clinics, I saw, and then you've also had some breathing performance clinics or workshops. Can you talk a little bit about that, and what are those?
Yeah. So the rowing, that's pretty typical to be expected from our camps. My husband was an ultra distance guy, and started with running. He was a by trade a running coach in the beginning of his career. And, me, I have this sitting on a shit ton of rowing experience. So we go around and do clinics, it's just a lot of skill and drill, but just to open up people's awareness and potential for those given sports. But within that, we've, kind of expanded our own horizons and looked into, not only sport, but also just being with a microscope a little bit more. And one of the most basic things about sport is, or even just being, is breathing, right? And something that we take for granted. First that was my husband's saying, is just everybody just assumes they have the right to run or know how to run just because we've done it for millions of years. And it's the same thing for breathing. It's like everybody just assumes they are breathing correctly just because they are breathing. And, we're not going around telling people that they're breathing wrong, but just showing that there is so much more capacity to, not only in sport, but also in everyday living, to have this healthy, consciousness of your breath and get the most out of your breath. I hate to admit it, I used to think I was a great breather. I'm like, that's the only reason why I was able to hang on, because it wasn't my, 5'9" shrimp physique that, took me to the top of the rowing podium. So I just assumed I had, great set of lungs, and but it actually turns out that I'm a shitty breather, and that attributed to a lot of my broken ribs, because I didn't know I still have a hard time figuring out how to breathe through my diaphragm, versus your chest, which is protecting all of, the vital organs. And lo and behold, if you are breathing, against the way your body is designed or nature, or it's just too much stress in, certain places, then they break. And so these breathing camps, my husband found a contraption a couple of years ago, called a training mask. And, their gig was it simulates altitude, which, that's not what we really found it useful for. We found it useful for that it restricts oxygen exchange, so oxygen in and carbon dioxide out. But more than that restriction helps train your diaphragm. Because it's restricted, you have to breathe correctly. Like if you try to breathe through your chest, if you even put a paper bag or, a rag over your face, you'll find out pretty quickly that it doesn't work very well. So what this training mask does is it helps train your breath and train you how to use your whole diaphragmatic, breathing pattern versus just a chest breathing pattern. And it's super important, especially for rowers, because we're in that seated position. And just anybody who's seated for a really long time will just basically get into a poor position with their spine and their pelvis and everything. And what we found is if you are not in a good position, you can't breathe well. So that's the big thing about what we're doing in these breathing camps, is just making people aware of what is your full capacity of breathing, and how you can even use your breath to get yourself into a flow state. And so a lot of top performers, that's how they get to where they are. It's not like, they're just sitting on the line like an everyday Joe and just go, hard. They actually have, and that's the addicting part of, sport as well, is getting to this state where you almost feel like you're an out of body experience, And so you can actually use your breath to help you get dialed into that, it's almost like getting into your limbic brain rather than your neocortex thinking brain. It's like your thinking brain shuts off and you just are reacting. And so you can use your breathing for that as well. So it's, we're doing a couple around the country. And also, Brian has partnered up with, this guy who surfs, some waves called Laird Hamilton. And he's been into this breathing and wellness side for a very long time, just because that is, that's his sport, but it's also his survival mechanism, to do what he does, at age 50 something, still surfing 100-foot waves and still chasing, the 100-foot ride on a 100-foot wave. How do you do that, while, and what he's kind of come to is it's about recovery and breathing. And so that's, my husband and Laird have started something called XPT Life. And so they're doing, breathing, but it's more of the wellness practice on that side.
Awesome. So it sounds like the training mask is a great tool to bring that awareness. The people are, before they put that on, they may have no idea that they're breathing from their neck or their chest. And all of a sudden it's like a very quick sort of, jolt. And it's like, wow, I have been completely out of touch with my body. Like I'm not even aware. And it's that idea of, breathing versus respiration. Like we all have to breathe or we're dead, but they're not breathing through their diaphragm like you're talking about. How I'm just curious, is that a big kind of eye opener when you go to the workshops and people try the mask and they're like, oh man.
Yeah. No, I think the biggest thing when you go to the camp, I mean, the masks are great, but they're becoming more and more popular, and it's great to kind of show people how we use them versus how, typically somebody would just stick it on and do, an hour workout. And we actually do it in between. So we don't do too much of the work with the mask on but it's the recovery. Like how fast can you recover in between intervals is really more important than, intervals itself. And so that's how we're using the mask. And so that's a huge eye opener too, to reverse it. And you're like, no, I'm just, counting the seconds till I have to start my next interval. And you're like, no, well, how many seconds is it actually taking you to recover and get your heart rate back down? Because once you get it down below, like 99, then that's when your body is starting to recover again. So it's more of a race, not to get the interval done, but like how fast can you recover after a hard interval? And so that's kind of cool to see that idea flipped on its head, and having that mask help people recover faster in between. And obviously better recovery means better performance. But the biggest thing in the breathing camps is the Wim Hof breathing that, my husband and Laird they've been doing for quite a while now and introed to me, but it's just consciousness. It's helping you get into that flow state that you want to just be aware of things. And it's like active meditation for, the ADD people. I think that helps a lot of people, and again, like you said, it's just a practice that's been around for thousands of years. Like all the yogis have been talking about breathing and its importance and meditation and just being. But I think a lot of us are just going so hard. It's like, I can't not think about nothing for, 20 minutes a day. Like that, all I think about is everything, And so with this breathing, it's something that it almost forces you to get to that point where your mind will just, it takes a couple of rounds, but your mind just goes shuts off, and it like almost gets a mirror back onto your face. So both of those things, with the training mask and the Wim Hof breathing, it's really cool to see people how it's like, oh, I have another tool to do, like to focus on besides just going harder and harder and doing more and more. It's like, no, I already have, this capacity within myself, and it's not about doing more. It's like, how much harder can I recover? How much more, how can I practice on recovering better?
Right. Instead of just how quickly can I get to the next, interval or the next piece. That's great. Yeah. That's awesome. Very cool. I think you've given me potentially a new toy that I need to check out and play with and experiment with. That sounds pretty cool. Awesome. All right. So we're kind of coming up. We got almost to an hour now. So I'll pepper you with some rapid fire questions here. We'll try to keep it interesting here. A little bit of fun. All right. So
to be so long-winded.
No, it's great. It's awesome. There's tons of great information packed in there. So Erin, what was going through your mind at the start line of the Olympic final?
Which Olympic final?
Yes, so you were at 2008, 2012. So I guess both. So let's start with 2008.
In 2008, I must say that I was definitely more nervous. I'd only been on the national team for a couple years at that time, but I remember having a little bit of jitters and questioning, had we done enough? Is this gonna, we had a great warm up. Like, you always feel better when you have a great warm up, and actually, interestingly enough, I remember feeling like I could just breathe easily. I'm going so hard on the warm up pieces, on like our 30 stroke pieces, and I was just like, I felt like there was all the oxygen in the world. Meanwhile, I was probably just inhaling a bunch of Beijing smog, but it felt like there was all the air or energy in the room, and I didn't need it was not a problem. And so that was kind of exciting. You're like, whoa, I feel good, So I remember sitting there being like, of course, questioning, like, have we done enough? We didn't know really what to expect from Romania, because they always just pulled something out of their butts every 4 years. And, but I purely remember in Beijing just kind of having fun and smiling and being like, I was still excited to be there. I was just sitting on the line. A lot of people, the race anxiety is their least favorite part. And for me, like, that's what kind of makes me feel alive. I don't like that middle of the road feeling. I either, like to feel really shitty, like put myself in pain, so then I know that I'm not supposed to be there, or I'm just like, I like to have that pressure, and that's what really truly makes me feel like I'm like doing something. I'm going down the right path. Stress, actually, I have a weird reaction to stress. I get sleepy, like I almost get calmed down. So yes, of course there were questions going through my mind, but more than anything, it was cool because I just let those kind of slip by, and then I just let that smile kind of get bigger and bigger on my face, and I just really felt, I don't know if luck is the right word, but I felt fortunate to be there with all of those girls on the line, because I was like, I get to row with, like, Lindsay and Anna and Elle and like every girl that was sitting in front of me. I was just really excited to be in a boat with them. I was like, let's see what we can do.
So cool.
Yeah. And then London was a little bit harder. I'm not so good at being the top dog. I'm better at being the underdog. But same thing. I remember tapers are hard for me, like, because you just have so much energy. But I remember thinking, okay, you're here, and last time you were here, you smiled and you remembered to have fun. And so it was almost like pulling from past memories. But I was just more anxious to, like, I felt so over the top ready for the London race that I felt like I almost had too much energy, like but the feelings of doubt weren't there as much. Like, I almost knew, in no way did I feel like this was overconfident or wanted to sound cocky or anything, but I knew whatever any other crew had to throw at us, we could just pull something out and react well. Like, that's how well I knew my boat mates and crew. And, everybody was trying to, make it a big race, us against the Canadians in 2012. And I was excited to race them because I actually wanted to have a good competition, but I knew that because I raced against all those girls in the boat so many times in the pair. Like, we just beat the pants off of each other for 4 years, and then we get to the Olympics and we finally get to be in the same boat, and we're like, oh, wait, I don't have to row against you? Oh, God, thank God, So I just knew that because they had, just performed so well against me, I knew that we would just be able to pull something out, even if, somebody just threw out a massive hand of, cards. We would just be able to pull something out. So, yeah, it was a very different experience from Beijing. Beijing was more just like little giddy, like, kid fun. But London was just like business. And I was just almost just like, let me get it out. Like, let's go do this. I was chomping at the bit. But I think that's something that really, not to get too, I know these are supposed to be rapid, but not to get too far off. I think that's something that you can train yourself to become, that will take your game to the next level, especially in a sprinting, middle distance sprinting type of sport like rowing, is train yourself to be excited and to use that adrenaline as a positive thing on the line. I think there's so many people that get that trying to turn that adrenaline into like a sour thing, or a hard thing in their belly, and that just creates a lot of acidity in your head and your body. And so it's just like, how do you turn it into like, no, I want to see what's going to happen. Like, I want to see what I can do. More of a positive use of adrenaline.
Nice. Living in the moment.
Yes.
Awesome. All right. If you could go back, what's one thing that you would change about? Well, no, sorry, we already kind of talked about the skill level stuff. So, what's one piece of advice you would give a younger athlete, somebody that's either in high school or college, who is just starting out with rowing?
That's just starting out with rowing.
Mm-hmm.
I would say, can I say two things?
Sure. Yeah, absolutely.
Always remember to play and have fun. Don't forget, because you probably are having fun and playing at that point in time. But yeah, remember how to play and not, just focus on the end result. looking back, I actually had the teammate that pissed me off at the time because I was so darn serious and she was so darn playful. Her name was Susan Francia. But looking back, I'm like, dude, she had so much fun. Like, she had fun with me, like pissing me off. She had fun, like poking other people. And, sometimes it would just, irk everybody because she was so darn like playful. And I was just like, looking back, I was like, damn it, that's what I should have done, And granted, like having someone like that in the boat I think she kind of forced me to play. And so, it's good to, even though you look at that and you're like, oh, you aren't serious. That's what I kept on telling her. You aren't serious enough. I really think that's a big reason we were so successful because she made us laugh a lot. So I would say play, and then this kind of goes hand in hand, but don't forget to just move like a human and like do other athletic things besides just the rowing movement. And it might sound like you're going against, your coach or the very traditional way of training for rowing, but I have seen it time and time again. The most athletic people are the best rowers. They aren't just fast on an erg or in the boat. They, like Olaf. I remember a story about Olaf Tufte. Is he Norwegian? I think he's Norwegian. Single sculler. And it was actually my coach Tom was telling me, he's like, yeah, you should go hang out with him. A lot of his training, he lives on a farm up in Norway. And so he like throws bales of hay, like moves, changes tractor tires and all of this. And I mean, he was a 3-time Olympic champion. So, I think it's just good to remember to do other things besides rowing, other, movement practices.
Yes. Got to have fun, right?
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, Erin, this has been a blast. Tons of good information. I'll make sure when we publish the podcast, I include the information back to the websites and stuff that you've given me, and I'll definitely follow up. But hopefully, everybody enjoyed the first inaugural episode here and could put some of Erin's words of wisdom into practice. So Erin, again, thank you so much. If you could just hang on the line so that way I could give you a proper goodbye. And everybody else, stay tuned for the next episode. Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks for listening to the Leo Training Podcast. Subscribe and get even more expert training tips at www.leotraining.io.